The nameless narrator is ensnared in the policeman's web, where everyday objects hide cosmic secrets. Flann O'Brien's The Third Policeman spirals deeper into madness. Tonight, chapters 7 through 9 delve into bicycle souls and the atomic dance of man and machine. Welcome back to a tale where absurdity is the only law. Our narrator, baffled by the station's oddities, learned the policeman's true obsession: bicycles that steal more than miles. The theories unfold, like threads in a mad tapestry. The severe shock which I encountered soon after re-entry to the barrack with the sergeant set me thinking afterwards of the immense consolations which philosophy and religion can offer in adversity. They seem to lighten dark places and give strength to bear the unaccustomed load. Not unnaturally, my thoughts were never very far from De Sulby. All his works, but particularly Golden Hours, have what one may term a therapeutic quality. They have a heart-lifted effect more usually associated with spirituous liquors, reviving and quietly restoring the spiritual tissue. This benign property of his prose is not, one hopes, to be attributed to the reason noticed by the eccentric Dagobert, who said the beauty of reading a page of De Sulby is that it leads one inescapably to the happy conviction that one is not of all nincompoops the greatest. This is, I think, an overstatement of one of De Sulby's most ingratiating qualities. The humanizing urbanity of his work has always seemed to me to be enhanced rather than vitiated by the chance obtrusion here and there of his minor failings. All the more pathetic because he regarded some of them as pinnacles of his intellectual prowess rather than indications of his frailty as a human being. Holding that the usual processes of living were illusory, it is natural that he did not pay much attention to life's adversities, and he did not, in fact, offer much suggestion as to how they should be met. Bassett's anecdote, too, on this point may be worth recounting. During De Selby's Bartown days, he had acquired some local reputation as a savant, due to possibly the fact that he was known never to read newspapers. A young man in the town was seriously troubled by some question regarding a lady, and feeling that this matter was weighing on his mind and threatening to interfere with his reason, he sought De Selby for advice. Instead of exorcising this solitary blot from the young man's mind, as indeed could easily been done, De Selby drew the young man's attention to some 50 imponderable propositions, each of which raised difficulties which spanned many eternities and dwarfed the conundrum of the young lady to nothingness. Thus, the young man, who had come fearing the possibility of a bad thing, left the house completely convinced the worst, and cheerfully contemplating suicide. That he arrived home for his supper at the usual time was a happy intervention on the part of the moon, for he had gone home by the harbor only to find that the tide was 2 miles out. 6 months later, he earned for himself 6 calendar months' incarceration with hard labor on foot of 18 counts, comprising larceny and offenses bearing an interference with railroads. So much for the savant as the dispenser of advice. As already said, however, De Selby provides some genuine mental sustenance if read objectively for what there is to read. In the Layman's Atlas, he deals explicitly with bereavement, old age, love, sin, death, and other saliencies of existence. It is true that he allows them only some 6 lines, but this is due to his devastating assertion that they are all unnecessary. Astonishing as it may seem, he makes this statement as directly corollary to his discovery that the earth, far from being a sphere, is sausage-shaped. Not a few of the critical commentators confess to a doubt as to whether De Selby was permitting himself a modicum of unwonted levity in connection with his theory, but he seems to argue the matter seriously enough and with no want of conviction. He adopts the customary line of pointing out fallacies involved in existing conceptions and then quietly setting up his own design in place of one he claims to have demolished. Standing at a point on the postulated spherical Earth, he says one appears to have four main directions in which to move, vis-a-vis north, south, east, and west. But it does not take much thought to see that there really appear to be only two, since north and south are meaningless terms in relation to a spheroid and can come out motion in only one direction. So also with west and east. One can reach any point on the north-south band by traveling in either direction. The only apparent difference is the two routes being extraneously considerations of time and distance, both already shown to be illusory. North and south is therefore one direction, and east and west apparently another. Instead of four directions, there are only two. It can be safely inferred, De Selby says, that there is a further similar fallacy inherent here, and that there in fact is only one possible direction, properly so called because it leaves one point on any point on the globe, moving and continuing to move in any direction. One ultimately reaches the point of departure again. The application of his conclusion to his theory is that the Earth as a sausage is illuminated. He attributes the idea that the Earth is spherical to the fact that human beings are continually moving in only one known direction, though convinced that they are free to move in any direction, and that this one direction is really around the circular circumference of an Earth, which is in fact sausage shaped. It can scarcely be contested that if multidirectionality be admitted to be a fallacy, the sphericity of the Earth is another fallacy that would inevitably follow from it. De Selby likens the position of a human on Earth to that of a man on a tight wire who must continue walking along the wire or perish, being, however, free in all other respects. Movement in this restricted orb results in the permanent hallucination known conventionally as life, with its innumerable concomitant limitations, afflictions, and anomalies. If a way can be found, says De Selby, of discovering the second direction, i.e., along the barrel of the sausage, a world of entirely new sensation and experience will be open to humanity. New and unimaginable dimensions will supersede the present order, and the manifold unnecessaries of one-directional existence will disappear. It is true that De Selby is rather vague as to how precisely this new direction is to be found. It is not, he warns us, to be ascertained by any microscopic subdivision of the known points of the compass, and little can be expected from sudden darts hither and thither in the hope that a happy chance will intervene. He doubts whether human legs would be suitable for traversing the longitude celestium, and seems to suggest that death is nearly always present when the new direction is discovered. As Bassett points out justly enough, this lends considerable color to the whole theory, but suggests at the same time that De Selby is merely stating in an obscure or recondite way something that is well known and accepted. As usual, there is evidence that he carried out some private experimenting. He seems to have thought at one time that gravitation was the jailer of humanity, keeping it on a one-directional line of oblivion, and that ultimate freedom lay in some upward direction. He examined aviation as a remedy without success, and subsequently spent some weeks designing certain barometric pumps, which were worked with mercury and wires, to clear vast areas of the earth on the influence of gravitation. Happily for the people of the place as well for their movable chattels, he does not seem to have had much result. Eventually he was distracted from these occupations by the extraordinary affair of the water box. As I have already hinted, I would have given much for a glimpse of a signpost showing the way along the barrel of the sausage after I had been 2 minutes back in the white day room with Sergeant Pluck. We were not more than completely inside the door when we became fully aware that there was a visitor present. He had colored stripes of high office on his chest, but he was dressed in a policeman's blue, and on his head he carried a policeman's hat, a special badge of superior office glittering very brilliantly in it. He was very fat and circular, with legs and arms of the minimum, and his large bush of mustache was bristling with bad temper and self-indulgence. The sergeant gave him looks of surprise and then a military salute. "Inspector O'Corky," he said. "What is the meaning of the vacuity of the station in routine hours?" barked the inspector. The sound his voice made, rough like coarse cardboard rubbed on sandpaper, and it was clear that he was not pleased with himself or with other people. "I was out myself," the sergeant replied, respectfully, "on emergency duty and police work of the highest gravity. Did you know that a man called Mathers was found in the crotch of a ditch up the road 2 hours ago, with his belly opened up with a knife or sharp instrument? To say that this was a surprise which interfered seriously with my heart valves would be the same as saying that a red hot poker would heat your face if someone decided to let you have it there." I stared from the sergeant to the inspector and back again, my whole inside fluttering in consternation. "It seems that our mutual friend Finnecane is in on the environs," Joe said. "Certainly I did," said the sergeant. "Very strange. How could he if he has been out with us after a bicycle for the last 4 hours?" "And what steps have you taken, and how many?" barked the inspector. "Long steps and steps in the right direction," replied the sergeant evenly. "I know who the murderer is." "Then why is he not arrested and into custody?" "He is." "Where?" "Here." This is the second thunderbolt. After I had glanced fearfully to my room without seeing a murderer, it became clear to me that I myself was the subject of the private conversation of the two policemen. I made no protest because my voice was gone and my mouth was bone dry. Inspector Corky was too angry to be pleased at anything so surprising as what the sergeant said. "Then why is he not confined under two-way key and padlock in the cell?" For the first time, the sergeant looked a bit crestfallen and shamefaced. His face got a little redder than it was, and he put his eyes on the stone floor. Tell you the truth, I said at last, I keep my bicycle there. I see, said the inspector. He stooped quickly and ran black clips on the extremities of his trouser and stamped on the floor. For the first time I saw that he had been leaning by one elbow on the counter. See that you regularize your irregularity instantaneously, he called as his goodbye, and set right your irrectitude and put the murderer in his cage before he rips the bag out of the whole countryside. After that he was gone. Sounds came to us, of course, scraping on the gravel, a sign that the inspector favored the old-fashioned method of mounting from the back step. Well now, the sergeant said. He took off his cap and he went over to a chair and sat on it, easing himself on his broad pneumatic seat. He took a red cloth from his fob and decanted the globes of perspiration from an expansive countenance, and opened the buttons of his tunic as if to let out on the wing the trouble that was imprisoned there. He then took to carry out a scientifically precise examination of the soles and toes of his police boots, a sign that he was wrestling with some great problem. "What is your worry?" I inquired, very anxious by now that what had happened should be discussed. "The bicycle," he said. "The bicycle? How can I put it out of the cell?" he asked. "I've always kept it in solitary confinement when I'm not riding it, to make sure it is not leading a personal life inimical to my own anonymity. It cannot be too careful. I have to ride long rides on my police rides." "Do you mean that I should be locked in the cell and kept there and hidden from the world? You surely heard the instructions of the inspector. Ask, is it all a joke?" Joe said. "Is this all a joke for entertainment purposes?" "If you take it that way, I will be indefinitely beholden to you," said the sergeant earnestly, "and I'll remember you with real emotion. It would be a noble gesture and an inevitable piece of supreme excellence on part of the deceased." "What?" I cried. "You must recollect that to turn everything to your own advantage is one of the regulations of true wisdom, as I informed you privately. It is the following of this rule on any part that make you a murderer this day evening. The inspector required a captured prisoner as the least tiniest minimum for his inferior bonhomme and mal d'esprit. It was your personal misfortune to be present adjacently at the time, but it was likewise my personal good fortune and good luck. There's no option but to stretch you for this serious offense." "Stretch me?" "Hang you by the windpipe before high breakfast time." "That is most unfair," I stuttered. It's unjust, rotten, fiendish." My voice rose to a thin tremolo of fear. "It is the way we work in this part of the country," explained the sergeant. "I will resist, and I will resist to the death to fight for my existence, even if I lose my life in the attempt." The sergeant made a soothing gesture of impersonation. He took out an enormous pipe, and when he stuck it in his face, it looked like a great hatchet. "About the bicycle," he said, when he had had it in commission. "What bicycle?" "My own one. Would it inconvenience you if I neglected to bar you in to the inside of the cell? I do not desire to be selfish, but I have to think carefully about my bicycle. The wall of this day room is no place for it." "I do not mind," I said quietly. "You can remain in the environs on parole and ticket of leave till we have time to build the high scaffold in the backyard." "How do you know I'll not make excellent my escape?" I asked, thinking that it would be better to discover all the thoughts and intentions of the sergeant, so that my escape would in fact be certain. He smiled at me as much as the weight of the pipe would let him. "You will not do that. It would not be honorable, but even if we would easily follow the track of your retire, and besides the rest of everything, Policeman Fox would be sure to apprehend you single-handedly on the outskirts. There would be no necessity for a warrant." Both of us sat silently for a while, occupied with our thoughts. He thinking about his bicycle, and I about my death. "By the by," Joe remarked, "I seem to remember our friend saying that the law could not lay a finger on us on account of your congenial anonymity." "Quite right," I said. "I forgot that. As things as are, I fancy it would not be much more than a baiting point." "It is worth mentioning," I said. "Oh, Lord, yes." "By the way," I said to the sergeant, "did you recover my American watch for me?" "The matter is under consideration and is receiving attention," he said officially. "Do you recall that you told me that I was not here at all because I had no name and that my personality was invisible to the law?" "I said that." "Then how can I be hanged for murder even if I did commit it, and there is no trial or preliminary proceedings, no caution administered, no hearing before Commissioner of the Public Peace?" Watching the sergeant, I saw him take the hatchet from his jaws in surprise and knot his brows in considerable corrugations. I could see he was severely troubled with my inquiry. He looked darkly at me and then doubled his look, giving me a compressed stare along the line of his first vision. "Well, great cripes!" he said. For 3 minutes he sat giving my representations his undivided attention. He sprang so heavily with wrinkles which were so deep that the blood was driven from his face, leaving it black and forbidding. Then he spoke. "Are you completely doubtless that you are nameless?" he asked. "Positively certain." "Would it be Mick Barry?" "No." "Charlemagne O'Keefe?" "No." "Sir Justin Spence?" "Not that." "Kimberly?" "No." "Bernard Farm?" "No." "Joseph Poe or Nolan?" "No." "One of the Garvins of the Mohawns?" "Not them." "Rosencrantz O'Dowd?" "No." "Would it be O'Benson?" "Not O'Benson." "The Quickleys? Mulroons? The Homermen?" "No." "The Hardiman or Merriman?" "Not them." "Yeah." "Peter Dundee?" "No." "Scratch?" "No." "Lord Brad?" "Not him." "The O'Gowneys? The O'Rourke's? Finneys?" "No." "That is an amazing piece of denial and denunciation," he said. He passed the red cloth over his face again to reduce the moisture. "An astonishing parade of nullarity," he added. "My name is not Jenkins either," I vouchsafed. "Roger McHugh?" "Not Roger." "Cedric Hogan?" "No." "Not Conroy?" "No." "Not O'Conroy?" "Not O'Conroy." "There are very few more names that you could have, then," he said, "because only a black man could have a name different to the ones I have recited. Or a red man. Not Byrne?" "No." "Then it is a nice pancake," he said gloomily. He bent double to give full scope to the extra brains he had at the rear of his head. "Holy suffering senators," he muttered. "I think we have won the day." "We are not home and dried yet," I answered. "Nevertheless, I think we can relax. Evidently he's never heard of Signor Bari, the golden-throated burglar of Milano. I don't think this is the time for pleasantries." "Or J. Courtney Wayne, private investigator and member of the inner bar. 18,000 guineas marked on the brief. The singular case of the red-headed men." "By Scott!" the sergeant suddenly. He got up to pace the flooring. "I think the case can be satisfactorily met," he said pleasantly, "and ratified unconditionally." I did not like his smile, and asked him for his explanation. "It is true," he said, "that you cannot commit a crime and have the right arm of the law cannot run a finger on you irrespective of the degree of your criminality. Anything you do is a lie, and nothing that happens to you is true." I nodded my agreement comfortably. "For that reason alone," said the sergeant, "we can take you and hang the life out of you, and you're not hanged at all, and there's no entry to be made in the death papers. Particular death you die is not even a death, which is an inferior phenomenon at the best, only an insanitary abstraction in the backyard, a piece of negative nullity neutralized and rendered void by asphyxiation and the fracture of the spinal string. If it is not a lie to say that you have been given the final hammer behind the barrack, equally it is true to say that nothing has happened to you." "You mean that because I have no name I cannot die, and that you cannot be held answerable for death even if you do kill me?" "That is about the size of it," said the sergeant. I felt so sad and so entirely disappointed that tears came into my eyes, and a lump of incommunicable poignancy swelled tragically in my throat. I began to feel intensively every fragment of my equal humanity. The life that was bubbling at the end of my fingers was real and nearly painful in intensity, and so was the beauty of my warm face, and the loose humanity of my limbs, and the racy health of my red, rich blood. To leave it all without good reason, and to smash the little empire into small fragments, was a thing too pitiful even to refuse to think about. The next important thing that happened in the day room was the entry of Policeman McCruiskin. He marched in to a chair and took out his black notebook and began to perusing his own autographed memoranda at the same time, twisting his lips into an arc like a purse. "Did you take the readings?" the sergeant asked. "I did," McCruiskin said. "Read them till I hear them," so the sergeant said, "and until I make a mental comparison inside the interior of my inner head." McCruiskin eyed the book keenly. 10.5. 10.5, said the sergeant. "And what was the reading on the beam?" 5.3. "And how much on the lever?" 2.3. 2.3 is high, said the sergeant. He put the back of his fist between the saws of his yellow teeth and commenced working at his mental comparisons. After 5 minutes, his face got clear, and he looked again to McCruisky. "Was there a fall?" he asked. "A light fall at 5:30. 5:30 is rather late if the fall was a light one," he said. "Did you put charcoal adroitly in the vent?" "I did," said McCruisky. "How much?" "£7." "I would say 8," said the sergeant. "7 was satisfactory enough," McCruisky said. "If you recollect, the reading on the beam has been falling for the past 4 days. I tried the shuttle, but there was no trace of play or looseness to it." "Yeah, I would still say 8 for safety first. and said the sergeant, but if the shell is tight, there can be no need for timorous anxiety. None at all, said McCruskey. The sergeant cleared his face of all the lines of thought he had on it and stood up and clapped his flat hands on his breast pockets. Well, now, he said. He stooped to put the clips on his ankles. I must go now to where I am going, he said, and let you, he said to Merkuski, come with me to the exterior for 2 moments till I inform you about recent events officially. Two of them went out together, leaving me in my sad and cheerless loneliness. Merkuski was not gone for long, but I was lonely during that diminutive meantime. When he came in again, he gave me a cigarette, which was warm and wrinkled from his pocket. I believe they're going to stretch you, he said pleasantly. I replied with nods. It is a bad time of the year. It will cost a fortune, he said. You'd not believe the price of timber. Would a tree not suffice? I inquired, giving tongue to a hollow whim of humor. I do not think it be proper, but I'll mention it privately to the sergeant. Thank you. The last hanging we had in this parish, he said, was 30 years ago. A very famous man called McDad. He held the record for the 100 miles on a solid tire. I need to tell you what that solid tire did for him. We had to hang the bicycle. Hang the bicycle? McDad had a first-class grudge against another man called Ferguson, but he did not go near Ferguson. He knew how things stood and gave Ferguson's bicycle a terrible thrashing with a crowbar. After that, McDad and Ferguson had a fight, and Ferguson, a dark man with glasses, did not live to know who the winner was. There was a great wake, and he was buried with his bicycle. Did you ever see a bicycle-shaped coffin? No. It is a very intricate piece of woodworking. You would want the first-class carpenter to make a good job of the handlebars, to say nothing of the pedals and the backstep. But the murder was a bad piece of criminality, and we could not find McDad for a long time, or make sure where the most of him was. We had to arrest his bicycle as well as himself, and we watched the two of them under secret observation for a week to see where the majority of McDad was, and whether the bicycle was mostly in McDad's trousers, pas if you understand my meaning. What happened? The sergeant gave his ruling at the end of the week. His position was painful in the extremity because he was a very close friend of McDad after office hours. He condemned the bicycle, and it was the bicycle that was hanged. We entered a null prosque in the day book in respect of the other defendant. I did not see the stretching myself because I'm a delicate man and my stomach is extremely reactionary. He got up and went to the dresser and took out his patent music box, which made sounds too hysterically rarefied to be audible to anyone but himself. He then sat back in his chair, put his hands through the hand straps, and began to entertain himself with the music. When he was playing could be roughly inferred from his face. It had a happy broad chord of satisfaction on it, a sign that he was occupied with loud, obstreperous barn songs and gusty shanties of the sea, and borderly roaring marching songs. The silence in the room was so unusually quiet that the beginning of it seemed rather loud when the utter stillness at the end of it had been encountered. How long his eeriness lasted, or how long we were listening, intently to nothing, is unknown. My own eyes got tired with inactivity and closed down like a public house at 10 o'clock. When they opened up again, I saw that McCruskey had desisted from the music and was making preparations for mangling his washing and his Sunday shirts. He had pulled a great rusty mangle from the shadow of the wall and had taken a blanket from the top of it and was screwing it down the pressure spring and spinning the hand wheel and furbishing the machine with expert hands. He went over then to the dresser and took small articles like dry batteries out of a drawer, then also an instrument like a prong and glass barrels with wires inside them, and other cruder articles resembling the hurricane lamps utilized by the county council. He put these things into different parts of the mangle, and when he had them all satisfactorily adjusted, the mangle looked more like a rough scientific instrument than a machine for wringing out a day's washing. The time of the day was now a dark time, the sun being about to vanish completely in the red west and would draw all the light. Mr. King kept on adding small, well-made articles to his mangle, and mounting indescribably delicate glass instruments about the metal legs and on the superstructure. When he finally finished his work, the room was almost black, and the sharp blue sparks would fly sometimes from the upside down of his hand when it was at work. Underneath the mangle, in the middle of the cast iron handiwork, I noticed a black book with colored wires coming out of it. And there, the small tinkering around to be heard if there was a clock in it. All as if all was the most complicated mangle I ever saw, and to the inside of a steam threshing mill it was not inferior in complexity. Passing near my chair to get an additional accessory, McCruskey saw I was awake and watching him. Don't worry if I think it is dark, he said to me, because I'm going to light the light and then mangle it for diversion and also scientific truth. Did you say you were going to mangle the light? Wait till you see now. What he did next, or which knobs he turned, I did not ascertain on account of the gloom, but it happened that a queer light appeared somewhere on the mangle. It was a local light that did not extend very much outside its own brightness, but it was not a spotlight, and still less a bear-shaped light. It was not steady completely, but it did not dance like candlelight. It was a light of a kind rarely seen in this country, and was possibly manufactured with raw materials from abroad. It was a gloomy light, and looked exactly as if there was a small area somewhere on the mangle, and was merely devoid of darkness. What happened next is astonishing. I could see the dim contours of McCruskey in attendance at the mangle. He made adjustments with his cunning fingers, stooping for a minute to work at the lower down inventions on the ironwork. He rose then to life size and started to turn the wheel of the mangle, slowly sending out a clamping creakiness around the barracks. The moment he turned the wheel, the unusual light began to change its appearance and situation in an extremely difficult fashion. With every turn it got brighter and harder, and shook with such a fine, delicate shaking that it achieved a steadiness unprecedented in the world by defining with its outer shakes the two lateral boundaries of the place where it was inconvertibly situated. It grew steelier and so intense in its livid pallor that it stained the inner screen of my eyes, so that it still confronted me in all quarters when I took my stare away from the mangle in effort to preserve my sight. McCruskey kept turning slowly at the handle, till suddenly, to my sick, utter horror, the light seemed to burst and disappear, and simultaneously there was a loud shout in the room, a shout which could not come from a human throat. I sat on the chair's edge and gave frightened looks at the shadows of McCruskey, who was scooping down again at the imitative scientific accessories of the mangle, making minor adjustments and carrying out running repairs in the dark. "What was that shouting?" I stuttered over him. "I'll tell you that in a tick," he called, "if you will inform me what you think the words of the shout were. What would you say it was in the shout now?" It was a question I was already working with in my own head. The earthy voice had roared out something very quick, with 3 or 4 words compressed into one ragged shout. One ragged shout. I could not be sure what it was, but several phrases sprung out of my head together, and each of them could have been the contents of the shout. They bore an eerie resemblance to commonplace shouts I had often heard, such as changing finale and shillelagh, 2 to 1 the field, mind the step, finish him off. I knew, however, that the shout could not be so foolish and trivial, because it disturbed me in a way that could only be done by something monumentous and diabolical. Ugh, damn. And Kruskin was looking at me with question in his eye. "I cannot make it out," I said, vaguely and feebly, "but I think it was railway station talk." "I've been listening to shouts and scream for years," he said, "but I can never surely catch the words. Would you say that he said, 'Don't press so hard'?" "No. Second favorites always win." "Not that. It's a difficult pancake," Kruskin said. A very compound crux. Wait till we try again." This time he screwed down the roller of the mangle until they were whining, and until it still was nearly out of the question to spin the wheel. The light that appeared was the thinnest and sharpest light I had ever imagined, like the inside of the edges of a sharp razor, and the intensification which came upon it with the turning of the wheel was too delicate a process to be watched even sideways. What happened eventually was not a shout, but a shrill scream, a sound not unlike the call of rats, yet far shriller than any sound which could be made by man or animal. Again I thought the words had been used, but the exact meaning of their language being belonged to was quite uncertain. "2 bananas a penny?" "Not bananas," I said. Kukushkin frowned vacantly. "It's one of the most compressed and intricate pancakes I've ever known." He put the blanket back over the mangle and pushed it to one side, and then lit the lamp on the wall by pressing some knob in the darkness. The light was bright but wavery and uncertain, but would be far from satisfactory for reading with. He sat back in his chair as if waiting to be questioned, and complimented on the strange things he had been doing. "What is your private opinion on all that?" he asked. "What were you doing?" I inquired. "Stretching light." "I do and understand your meaning." "I do not understand your meaning." "I will tell you the size of it," he said, "and indicate roughly the shape of it. It is no harm if you know unusual things, because you will be a dead man in 2 days, and you will be held incognito and communicate in the meantime. Did you ever tell? I hear tell of ominous. Omnium. Omnium is the right name for it, although you will not find it in the book. Are you sure that's the right name? I'd never heard of that word except in Latin. Certain. How certain? The sergeant says so. And what is omnium the right name for? Mr. Kruskin smiled at me indulgently. You are omnium, and omnium is the mangle, and my boot's here, and so's the wind in the chimney. That's enlightening, I said. It comes in waves, he explained. What color? Every color. High or low? Both. The way my inquisitive curiosity was sharpened, but I saw that questions were putting the matter further into doubt instead of clearing it. I kept my silence until McCruskey spoke again. Some people, he said, call it energy, but the right name to omnium because there is far more than energy in the inside of it, whatever it is. Omnium is the essential inherent interior essence which is hidden inside the root of the kernel of everything and is always the same. I nodded wisely. It never changes, but it shows itself a million ways, and it always comes in waves. Now to take the case of the light on the mangle. Take it, I said. Light is the same omnium in a short wave, but it comes on longer wave. It's a form of noise or sound. With my old patents, I can stretch a ray out until it becomes sound. I see. And when I have a shut in that box with the wires, I can squeeze it till I get heat, and you'll not believe the inconvenience of it all in the winter. You see that lamp on the wall there? Ida? That is operated by a patent compressor and secret instrument connected with that box with the wires. The box is full of noise. Myself and the sergeant spend our spare time in the summer collecting noises that we can have light and heat for official life in the dark winter. That is why the lights going up and down. Some of the like noises are noisier than others, and a pair of us will be blinded if we come to the time when the quarry was working, but last September. It is in the box numbers and a board to come about. The due course is come out of it in due course inevitably. Blasting operations, dynamiters, and extravagant combustions of the most far-reaching kind. The omnium is business end of everything. If you can find the right wave that results in a tree, you can make a small fortune out of timber for years. The policeman and cows, are they all in wares? Everything is on wave, and omnium is on the back of the whole shooting match unless I'm a Dutchman from the distant Netherlands. Some people call it God, and there are other names for it that is resembling, and that thing is omnium, and it's also the same bargain. Cheese? Yes, omnium. Even braces? Even braces. Did you ever see a piece of it, or what color it is? Kukuskin smiled wryly and spread his hands into red fans. That's a supreme pancake, he said. If you could say what the shouts mean, it might be makings of the answer. The storm and water and brown bread and the feel of hailstones on the bare head, are those all omnium on a different wave? All omnium. Could you not get a piece and carry it in your waistcoat so that you could change the world to suit you when it suited you? Is it the ultimate and do inexorable pancake? If you had a sack of it or even half full of a small matchbox of it, you could do anything and even do what could not be described by that name. I understand you. McCruiskin sighed and went again into the dresser, taking something from the drawer. When he sat down at the table again, he began to move his hands together, performing intricate loops and convolutions with his fingers as if they were knitting something, but there were no needles in them at all. Nothing to be seen except his naked hands. Are you working again at the little chest? I asked. I am, he said. I sat watching him idly, thinking of my own thoughts. For at the first time I recalled the wherever my unhappy visit to the queer situation I was in. Not my watch, but the black box. Where was it? If McCruskey knew the answer, would he tell me? If I asked him, if I by chance did not escape safely from hanging his noose, would I ever see it or know what was inside of it? Know the value of the money I could never spend? Know how handsome could bend my volumes on to Selby? Would I ever see John Dibney again? Where was he now? Where my watch? You have no watch. That was true. I felt my brain cluttered and stuffed with questions and blind perplexity, and also felt the sadness of my position coming back in my throat. I felt completely alone, but with a snail's hope that I would escape safely at the tail end of everything. I had made up my mind to ask you if you knew anything about the cash box when my attention was distracted by another surprising thing. The door was flung open, and in some In came Gulhaney, his red face puffing from the rough road. He did not quite stop or sit down, but kept moving restlessly about the day room, paying no attention to me at all. McCruskeen had reached a meticulous point in his work and had his head nearly on the table to make sure his fingers were working correctly and making no serious mistakes. When he passed the difficulty, he looked up somewhat at Gulhaney. "Is it about a bicycle?" he asked casually. "Only about timber," said Gulhaney. "Well, what's your timber news?" "Price has been put up by a Dutchman. Cost a good scaffold to get. Cost you a fortune." "Arrest the Dutchman," Mr. said in a tone that meant he knew the term of trade inside and out. "Three-man scaffold with a good trap and satisfactory steps will set you back £10 without a rope or labor," Gulhaney said. £10 is a lot of money for a hanger, said McCruskeen. But a two-man scaffold with push-off instead of a mechanical trap and a ladder for steps would cost the best majority of £6 rope extra. And dear, at the same prices, said McCruskeen. A £10 scaffold's a better job. There's more class about it. There's a charm about a scaffold if it's well made and satisfactory. What occurred next I did not see properly because I was listening to pitiless talk even with my own eyes. But something astonishing happened again. Gulhaney had gone near McCruskeen to talk down at him seriously, and I think he made the mistake of stopping dead completely instead of keeping on the move to preserve his perpendicular balance. The outcome was that he crashed down, half on bent McCruskeen and half on the table, bringing the two of them with him in a heap of shouts and confusion on the floor. Policeman's face when I saw the frightening sight. It was the color of a dark a plum with passion, but his eyes burned like bonfires in the forehead, and there were frothy discharges at his mouth. He said no words for a while, only sounds of jungle anger, with all grunts and clicks of demonic hostility. Gulhaney had covered to the wall and raised himself with the help of it, then retreated to his door. When Raguskin found his tongue again, he used the most unclean language he ever spoke about, and ended dirtier words with the dirtiest ever spoken anywhere. He puts names like Gulhaney too impossible and revolting to be written with known letters. He was temporarily insane with anger because he rushed ultimately to the dresser where he kept his properties and pulled out a patent gun and swept it around the room to threaten the two of us and every breakable article in the house. "Get down on 4 knees, two of you, on the floor," he roared, "and don't stop searching for that chest you have knocked down until you find it." Gulhaney stopped down to his knees at once, and I did the same thing without troubling to look at the policeman's face because I could remember distinctly what it looked like the last time I eyed it. We crawled feebly across the floor, peering and fleeing, feeling for something that could not be felt or seen and that was really too small to be lost at all. "This is amusing. You're going to be hung for murdering a man you did not murder, and now you'll be shot for not finding a tiny thing that probably does not exist at all. And in any event, you did not lose." "I deserve it all," I answered, "for not being here at all," to quote the words of the sergeant. Well, how long we remained at a peculiar task, Gulhaney, and it is not easy to remember. 10 minutes or 10 years, perhaps, with McCruskeen seated near us, fingering the iron and glaring savagely at bent forms. Then I caught Gulhaney showing his face to me sideways and giving me a broad private wink. Soon he closed his fingers, got up erect with the assistance of the door handle, and advanced to where McCruskeen was, smiling his gappy smile. "Here you are, and here it is," he said with closed hand outstretched. "Put it on the table," McCruskeen said evenly. Gulhaney put his hand on the table and opened it. "You now go away and take your departure," McCruskeen told him, "and leave the premises for the purpose of attending to this emperor." When Gulhaney was gone, I saw that most of his passions had ebbed from the policeman's face. He sat silent for a time, and then gave his customary sigh and got up. "I have more to do tonight," he said to me civilly, "so I will show you where you are to sleep in the dark night time." He lit a queer light that had wires to it and a diminutive box full of minor noises, and led me into a room where there was 2 white beds and nothing else. "Now, Hawley thinks he's a clever one and a mastermind," he said. "He might be, or maybe not," I muttered. "He does not take much into account of coincidental chances. He does not look like a man that could care much. Then he said he had the chest he thought he was making me into a prize pup and blinding me by putting his thumb in my eye. That's what it looked like. A rare chance he did accidentally close his hand on the chest, and it was the chest and nothing else that replaced the due course of the table. There was some silence here. "Which bed?" I asked. "This one," said McCruskeen. After McCruskeen had tiptoed delicately, Chapter 7, or Chapter 8, 5, 6, 7, 8, yeah, Chapter 8, from the room like a trained nurse and shut the door without a sound. I found myself standing by the bed and wondering stupidly what I was going to do with it. I was weary in body and my brain was numb. I had a curious feeling about my left leg. I thought it was, so to speak, spreading, that its woodness was slowly extending throughout my whole body, a dry timber poison killing me inch by inch. Soon my brain would be changed to wood completely, and I would be then dead. Even if the bed was made of wood, not metal, if I were to lie in it. Would you sit down for pity's sake and stop standing there like I'd gone? Joe said suddenly. I'm not sure what to do next if I stop standing, I answered, but I sat down on the bed for pity's sake. There's nothing difficult about a bed. Even a child can learn to use a bed. Take off your clothes and get into bed, and lie on it, and keep lying on it, even if it makes you feel foolish. I saw the wisdom of this and started to undress. Felt almost too tired to go through that simple task. When all my clothes were laid on the floor, they were much more numerous than I expected, and my body was unsurprisingly white and thin. I opened the bed fastidiously, lay in the middle of it, closed it up again carefully, and let out a sigh of happiness and rest. I felt as if all my weariness and perplexities of the day had descended on me pleasurably like a great heavy quilt, which would keep me warm and sleepy. My knees opened up like rosebuds in rich sunlight, pushing my shins 2 inches further to the bottom of the bed. Every joint became loose and foolish and devoid of true utility. Every inch of my person gained weight with every second until the total burden on the bed was approximately 500,000 tons. This was evenly distributed on the 4 wooden legs of the bed, which had now become an integral part of the universe. My eyelids, each weighing no less than 4 tons, lewd ponderously across my eyeballs. My narrow shins, itchier and more remote in their agony of relaxation, moved further away from me until my happy toes pressed closely on the bars. My position was completely horizontal, ponderous, absolute, and incontrovertible. United with the bed, I became monumentous and planetary. Far away from the bed, I could see the outside night framed neatly in the window as if it were a picture on the wall. There was a bright star in one corner with other smaller stars elsewhere scattered about in sublime profusion. Lying quietly and dead-eyed, I reflected on how new the night was, how distinctive and unaccustomed its individuality, robbing me of the reassurance of my eyesight. It was disintegrating my body personality into a flux of color, smell, recollection, desire, all the strange uncounted essences of terrestrial and spiritual existence. I was deprived of definition, position, and magnitude, and my significance was considerably diminished. Lying there, I felt the weariness ebbing from me slowly, like a tide retiring over limitless sands. The feeling was so pleasurable and profound that I sighed again, a long sound of happiness. Almost at once I heard another sigh and heard Joe murmuring some contented incoherency. His voice was near me, yet did not seem to come from the accustomed place within. I thought that he must be lying beside me in the bed, and I kept my hands carefully at my side in case I should accidentally touch him. I felt, for no reason, that his diminutive body would be horrible to the human touch, scaly or slimy like an eel, or with paring roughness like a cat's tongue. That's not very logical, or complimentary either, he said suddenly. What is it? That about my body? Why scaly? That's only my joke, I chuckled drowsily. I know you had no body except my own, perhaps. Why scaly? I don't know. How can I know why I think my thoughts? My God, I won't be called scaly. His voice, to my surprise, had become shrill with perpetulance. Then he seemed to fill the world with his resentment, not by speaking, but remaining silent after he had spoken. Now, Joe, I murmured soothingly. Because if you're looking for trouble, you can have your belly full, he snapped. You have no body, Joe. Then why do you have to say I have? And why scaly? You have a strange idea not unworthy of the Selby. Why was Joe so disturbed if he had a body? A body with another body inside it, and in turn thousands of such bodies within each other like the skins of an onion, receiving some imaginable ultimatum? Was I in turn merely a link in a vast sequence of imponderable beings, a world I knew merely the interior of the being whose inner voice I myself was? Who or what was the core, and what monster in what world was the final uncontained colossus? God? Nothing? Was I receiving these wild thoughts from lower down, or were they brewing newly in me to be transmitted higher up? From lower down, Joe barked. Thank you. I'm leaving. What? Clearing out. We'll see who's scaly in 2 minutes. These few words sickened me instantly with fear, although their meaning was too monumentous to be grasped without close reasoning. The scaly idea. Where did I get that from? I cried. Higher up, he shouted. Puzzled and frightened, I tried to understand the complexities not only of my intermediate dependence and my cantonal unintegrity, but also my dangerous adjunctiveness and my embarrassing uninsulation, if one assumes. Listen, before I go, I'll tell you this. I am your soul and all your souls. When I am gone, you are dead. Past humanity is not only implicit in each new man born, but is contained in him. Humanity is an ever-widening spiral, and life is the beam that plays briefly on each succeeding ring. All humanity, from its beginning to its end, is already present, but the beam has not yet played beyond you. Your earthly successors await dumbly and trust to your guidance and mine and all my people inside me to preserve them and lead the light further. You are not now the top of your people's line any more than your mother was when she had you inside her. When I leave you, I take with me all that has made you what you are. I take all your significance and importance and all the accumulations of human instinct and appetite and wisdom and dignity. You will be left with nothing behind you and nothing to give the waiting ones. Woe to you when they find you out. Goodbye. Although I thought this speech was rather far-fetched and ridiculous, he was gone, and I was dead. Her preparations for the funeral were put in hand at once. Lying in my dark, blanket-padded coffin, I could hear the sharp blows of a hammer nailing down the lid. It soon turned out the hammering was the work of Sergeant Pluck. He was standing smiling at me from the doorway, and he looked large and lifelike and surprisingly full of breakfast. Over the tight collar of his tunic he wore a red ring of fat that looked fresh and decorative as if he'd come directly from the laundry. His mustache was damp from drinking milk. Thank goodness to be back to Sandy, Joe said. His voice was friendly and reassuring, like pockets in an old suit. Good morning to you in the morning time, the sergeant said pleasantly. I answered him in a civil way and gave particulars of my dream. He leaned listening on the jam, taking in the difficult parts with a skilled ear. When I had finished, he smiled at me in pity and good humor. You've been dreaming, man, he said. Wondering at him, looked away to the window. Night was gone from it without a trace, leaving in substitution a distant hill that lay gently against the sky. Clouds of white and gray pillowed out, and on its soft-shouldered trees and boulders were put pleasingly to make it true. I could hear a morning wind making its way inaudibly throughout the world, and all the low unsilence of the daytime was in my ear, bright and restless like a caged bird. I sighed and looked back at the sergeant, who was still leaning and quietly picking his teeth, uh, absent-faced and still. I remember well, he said, a dream that I had 6 years ago on the 23rd of November next. A nightmare would be truer word. I dreamt, if you please, that I had a slow puncture. That's a surprising thing, I said idly, but not astonishing. Was it the work of a tin tack? Not a tin tack, said the sergeant, but too much starch. I did not know. I did not know, I said sarcastically, that they starched Che roads. It's not the road, and for a wonder it was not the fault of the county council. I dreamt that I was cycling on an official business for 3 days. Suddenly I felt the saddle getting hard and lumpy underneath me. I got down and felt the tires, but they were unexceptional and fully pumped. Then I thought my head was giving me a nervous outbreak from too much overwork. I went into a private house where there was a qualified doctor, and he examined me completely and told me what the trouble was. I had a slow puncture. He gave a coarse laugh and half turned to me his enormous backside. Here, look, he laughed. I see, I murmured. Chuckled loudly, he went away for a minute and came back again. I have to put the stirabout on the table, he said, and the milk is still hot from being inside the cow's milk bag. I put on my clothes and went to my breakfast in the day room where Sergeant McCruskeen were talking about their figures. 6.9, 6.3 circulating, McCruskeen was saying. High, said the sergeant, very high. Must be a ground heat. Tell me about the fall. Medium fall at midnight and no lumps. The sergeant laughed and shook his head. No lumps indeed, he chuckled. There will be hell to pay tomorrow on the lever if it's true there's a ground heat. Rikushkin got up suddenly from his chair. I'll give her half a hundredweight of charcoal, he announced. He marched straight out of the house, muttering calculations, not looking where he's going, but staring straight in the middle of his black notebook. I'd almost finished my crock of porridge and lay back to look fully at the sergeant. When are you going to hang me? I asked, looking fearlessly into his large face. I felt refreshed and strong and confident that I would escape without difficulty. Tomorrow morning, if we have the scaffolding up in time, and unless it's raining. You do not believe how slippery the rain can make a new scaffold. You could slip and break your neck into fancy fractures, and you'd never know what happened to your life or how you lost it. Well, I said firmly, if I'm to be a dead man in 24 hours, will you explain to me what these figures in McCruskey's black book are? Sergeant smiled indulgently. The readings? Yes. If you're going to be dead completely, there is no insoluble impediment to that proposal, he said, but it is easier to show you than to tell you verbally. Follow behind me like a good man. He led the way to a door in the back passage and threw it open with an air of monumentous revelation, standing aside politely to give me a complete and unobstructed view. What do you think of that? He asked. I looked in the room and did not think much of it. It was a small bedroom, gloomy and not too clean. It was in great disorder and filled with a heavy smell. It is McCruskeen's room, he explained. I do not see much, I said. The sergeant smiled patiently. You are not looking in the right quarter, he said. I have looked everywhere that can be looked, I said. The sergeant led the way in the middle of the floor and took possession of a walking stick that was convenient. If I ever want to hide, he remarked, I will always go upstairs in a tree. People have no gift for looking up. They seldom examine lofty altitudes. I looked at the ceiling. There's little to be seen there, I said, except a blue bottle that looks dead. Sergeant looked up and pointed with the stick. It's not a blue bottle, he said. Chat is Garrity's outhouse. I looked squarely at him in a mixed way, but he was paying me no attention, but pointing to other tiny marks upon the ceiling. That, he said, is Martin Bundle's house, and that is Turnahan's, and that one there is where the married sister lives. And here we have the lane from Turnahan's to the main telegraph trunk road. He drew his stick along a wavering faint crack that ran down a deeper crack. A map, I cried excitedly. And here we have the barrack, he added. It is all as plain as Pikestick. When I looked carefully at the ceiling, I saw that Mr. Mather's house and every road and house I knew were marked there, and nets of lanes and neighborhoods that I did not know also. It is a map of the parish, complete, reliable, and astonishing. Sergeant looked at me and smiled again. You will agree that it is a fascinating pancake and conundrum, a great incontinent, a phenomenon of the first rarity. Did you make it yourself? I did not, and nobody else manufactured it either. It was always there, and McCruskey is certain that it was there even before that. The cracks are natural, and so are small cracks. With my cocked eye, I traced the road we came when Bill Dehaney had found his bicycle at the bush. Funny thing is, Sergeant said, that McCruskey lay for 2 years staring at that ceiling before he saw it was a map with superb ingenuity. Now that was stupid, I said thickly. And he lay looking at the map for 5 years more before he saw that it showed the way to eternity. To eternity? Certainly. Will it be possible for us to come back from there? I whispered. Of course, there's the lift. We'll wait till I show you the secret of the map. He took up the stick again and pointed to the mark that meant the barracks. Here we are in the barracks on the main telegraph trunk road, he said. Now use your internal imagination and tell me what left-hand road you meet if you go forth from the barracks on the main road. I thought this out without difficulty. You meet the road that meets the main road at Jarvis's outhouse, I said, where we came from the finding of the bicycle. Then that road is the first turn on the left-hand latitude. Yes, and here it is here. Pointed out the left-hand road with the stick and tapped Mr. Jarvis's outhouse at the corner. And now, he said solemnly, come and inform me what that is. He drew the stick along a thin, faint crack that joined the crack of the main road about halfway between the barrack and the road at Mr. Jarvis's. What would you call that? He repeated. There's no road there, I cried excitedly. The left-hand road at Jarvis's is the first road on the left. I'm not a fool. There's no road there. By God, if you're not, you will be. You're a goner if you listen to much more of this gentleman's talk. But there is a road there, said the sergeant triumphantly, if you know how to look knowledgeably for it. And a very old road. Come with me till we see the size of it. Is this the road to eternity? It is indeed, but there is no signpost. Although he made no move to release his bicycle from its solitary confinement in the cell, he snapped the clips adroitly on his trousers and led the way heavily in the middle of the morning. We marched together down the road. Neither of us spoke, and neither listened for what the other might have to say. When the keen wind struck me in the face, it snatched away the murk of doubt and fear and wonder that was anchored on my brain like a rain cloud on a hill. All my senses, relieved from the agony of dealing with the existence of the sergeant, became supernaturally alert at the work of interpreting the genial day for my benefit. The world rang in my ear like a great workshop. Some blind feats of mechanics and chemistry were evident on every side. The earth was agog with invisible industry. Trees were active where they stood and gave uncompromising evidence of their strength. Incomparable grasses were forever at hand, lending their distinction to the universe. Patterns were difficult to imagine, were made together by everything the eye could see, merging into supernal harmony their unexceptional varieties. Men who were notable for the whiteness of their shirts worked diminutively in a distant bog, toiling in the brown turf and heather. Patient horses stood near with their useful carts, and littered among the boulders on a hill beyond were tiny sheep at pasture. Birds were audible in the secrecy of the bigger trees, changing branches and conversing not tumultuously. In a field by the road, a donkey stood quietly, as if he were examining the morning, bit by bit, unhurryingly. He did not move, his head was high, and his mouth chewed nothing. He looked as if he understood completely the unexplainable enjoyments of the world. My eye ranged round unsatisfied. I could not see enough in sufficient fullness before I took the left turn for eternity in company with the sergeant, and my thoughts remained entangled in what my eyes were looking at. You don't mean to say that you believe in this eternity business? What choice have I? You'd be foolish to doubt anything after yesterday. That is all very well, but I think I can claim to be an authority on the subject of eternity. There must be a limit to this gentleman's monkey tricks. I am certain there isn't. Nonsense, you're becoming demoralized. I'll be hung tomorrow. That is doubtful, but if it has to be faced, we'll make a brave show. We? Certainly, I'll be there to the end. In the meantime, let us make up our minds that eternity is not up a lane that is found by looking at cracks in the ceiling of a country policeman's bedroom. Then what is up the lane? I cannot say. If he said that eternity was up the lane and left it at that, I would not kick so hard. But when we are told that we're coming back from there in a lift, well, I begin to think he's confusing nightclubs with heaven. A lift? Surely, I argued, if we conceal that eternity is up the lane, the question of the lift is a minor matter. That is the case with swallowing a horse and a cart and straining at a flea. No, I bar the lift. I know enough about the next world to be sure that you don't get there and come back out of it in a lift. Besides, you must be near the place now, and I don't see any elevator shaft running up into the clouds. And he had no handlebars on him, I pointed out, unless the word lift had a special meaning, like drop when you're talking about a scaffold. I suppose smash under the chin with a heavy spade could be called a lift. If that's the case, you can be certain about eternity and have the whole of it yourself and welcome. I still think there's an electric lift. My attention was drawn away from this conversation to the sergeant, who had now slackened his pace and was making curious inquiries with a stick. The road had reached a place where there was rising ground on each side, ranking grass and brambles near our feet, with a tangle of bigger things behind that, and tall brown thickets beset with green creeper plants beyond. It is here somewhere, the sergeant said, or beside a place somewhere near the next place adjacent. He dragged the stick along the green margin, probing at the hidden ground. McCruiskin rides his bicycle along the ground here, he said. It is an easier pancake. The wheels are sure, and the seat is a more sensitive instrument than the horny hand. After another walk and more probing, he found what he was searching for, and suddenly dragged me into the undergrowth, parting the green curtains of the branches with a practiced hand. This is a hidden road, he called backward from the head. It's not easy to say whether road is the correct name for a place that must be fought through inch by inch at the cost of minor wounds, and then the sting of strained branches slapping back against the person. Nevertheless, the ground was even against the foot, and some dim distance to each side, I could see the ground banking up sharply with rocks and gloominess and damp vegetation. There was a sultry smell, and many flies of the gnat class were at home here. A yard in front of me, the sergeant was plunging on wildly with his head down, thrashing the younger shoots severely with his stick, and calling muffled warnings to me of the strong, distended boughs he was about to release in my direction. I do not know how long we traveled, or what the distance was, but the air and the light got scarcer and scarcer until I was sure that we were lost in the boughs of a great forest. The ground was still even enough to walk on, but covered with the damp and rotting fall of many autumns. I had followed the noisy sergeant with blind faith till my strength was nearly gone, so that I reeled forward instead of walking, and was defenseless against the brutality of the bogs. I felt very ill and exhausted. I was about to shout to him that I was dying, when I noticed the growth was thinning, and the sergeant was calling to me, from where he was hidden and ahead of me, that we were there. When I reached him, he was standing before me, a small stone building, and bending to take the clips from his trousers. "This is it," he said, nodding his stooped head at the little house. "This is what?" I muttered. "The entrance to it," he replied. The structure looked exactly like the porch of a small country church, The darkness and the confusion of the branches made it hard for me to see whether there was a larger building at the rear. The little porch was old, with green stains on the stonework and warts of moss in its many crannies. The door was an old brown door with ecclesiastical hinges and ornamental ironwork. It was set far back and made to measure in its peaked doorway. This was the entrance to eternity. I knocked the streaming sweat from my forehead with my hand. The sergeant was feeling himself centrally for his keys. "It is very close," he said politely. "Is this the entrance to the next world?" I murmured. My voice was lower than I thought it would be, owing to my exertions and trepidation. "But it is seasonal weather, and we can't complain," he added loudly, paying no attention to my question. My voice, perhaps, had not been strong enough to travel to his ear. He found a key which he rasped in the keyhole and threw the door open. He entered the dark inside, but sent his hand out again to twitch me in after him by the coat sleeve. "Strike a match there." Almost at the same time, the sergeant had found a box with knobs and wires in it in the wall, and did whatever was necessary to make it give out a startling leaping light from where it was. For during the second I was standing in the dark, I had ample time to get surprised in my life. It was the floor. My feet were astonished when they trod on it. It is made of platefuls of tiny studs, like the floor of a steam engine, or like the railed galleries that run across a great printing press. It rang with ghostly hollow noise beneath the hobnails of the sergeant, who had now clattered to the other end of the room to fuss with his chain of keys, and to throw open another door that was hidden in the wall. Of course, a nice shower of rain would clear the air, he called. I went carefully over to see what he was doing in the little closet he had entered. Here he had operated successfully another unsteady light box. He stood with his back to me, examining panels in the wall. There were two of them, tiny things like matchboxes, and the figure 16 could be seen in one panel and 10 in the other. He sighed and came out of the closet and looked at me sadly. "They say that walking takes it down," he said, "but it is my own experience that walking puts it up. Walking makes it solid, and leaves plenty of room for more." I thought at this stage that a simple and dignified appeal might have some prospect of succeeding. "Will you please tell me," I said, "since I will be dead man tomorrow, where are we and what are we doing?" "Weighing ourselves," he replied. "Weighing ourselves? Step into the box there until we see what your registration is by the plain record." I stepped warily on to more iron plates in the closet and saw the figures change to 9 and 6. 9 stone 6 pounds. And the most invidious weight. I'd give 10 years of my life to get the beef down. He hands back to me again, opening still another closet in another wall, and passing trained fingers over another light box. And a steady light came, and I saw him standing in the closet, looking at his large watch and winding it absently. The light was leaping beside his jaw, and throwing unearthly leaps of shadow on his gross countenance. "Will you step over here," he called me at last, "and come with me unless your desire to be left behind is your own company." When I had walked over and stood silently beside him, in the still closet, he shut the door on us with a precise click and leaned against the wall thoughtfully. I was about to ask for several explanations when a cry of horror came bounding from my throat. No noise or warning at all, the floor was giving way beneath us. "It's no wonder that you're yawning," the sergeant said conversationally. "It's very close. The ventilation is very far from satisfactory." "I was only screaming," I blurted. "What is happening in this box we're in? Where—" My voice trailed away to a dark cluck of fright. The floor was falling so fast beneath us that it seemed once or twice to fall faster than I could fall myself, so that it was sure that my feet had left it, and I had taken up position for brief intervals halfway between the floor and the ceiling. In panic, I raised my right foot and smote it down with my weight and my strength. It struck the floor, but only with a puny tinkling noise. I swore and groaned and closed my eyes and wished for a happy death. I felt my stomach bounding sickeningly about inside me as if there were a wet football filled with water. "Lord save us!" "It does a man no harm," the sergeant remarked pleasantly, "to move around a bit and see things. It's a great thing for widening out the mind. Wide mind is a grand thing, and nearly always leads to far-seeing and vengeance. Look at Sir Walter Raleigh, the pedal bicycle, and Sir George Stephenson with his steam engine, and Napoleon Bonaparte, and George Sand, and Walter Scott, great men all. Are we in eternity yet?" I shouted. "We are not there yet, but nonetheless we are near there," he answered. "Listen with all your ears for a little click." When I could say to tell of my personal position, I was locked in an iron box with 16 stone policemen, following appallingly forever, listening to the talk about Walter Scott and listening for a click also. Click! It came at a large, sharp, and terrible. Almost at once the falling changed, either stopping altogether or becoming a much slower falling. "Yes," said the sergeant brightly, "we are there now." I noticed nothing whatsoever except the thing end gave a jolt, and the floor seemed to resist my feet suddenly, in a way that might have been eternal. Sergeant fingered the arrangement of knob-like instruments on the door, which he opened after a time and stepped out. That was the lift, he remarked. It is peculiar that when one expects some horrible, incalculable, and devastating thing which does not materialize, one is more disappointed than relieved. I had expected for one thing a blaze of eye-destroying light. No other expectation was clear enough in my brain to be mentioned. Instead of this radiance, I saw a long passage lit fitfully at intervals by the crude, homemade noise machines, with more darkness to be seen than light. The walls of the passage seemed to be made with bolted sheets of pig iron, in which were set rows of small doors, which looked to me like ovens or furnace doors or safe deposits, such as banks have. The ceiling, where I could see it, was a mass of wires and what appeared to be particularly thick wires or possibly pipes. All the time there was an entirely new noise to be heard, not unmusical, sometimes like water gurgling underground, and sometimes like subdued conversation in a foreign tongue. The sergeant was already looming ahead on his way up the passage, treading heavily on the plates. He swung his keys jauntily and hummed a song. I followed near him, trying to count the little doors. There were 4 rows of 6 in every lineal 2 yards of wall, or a total of many thousands. Here and there I saw a dial or an intricate nest of clocks, and knobs resembling control boards with masses of coarse wires converging from all quarters of it. I did not understand the significance of anything, but I thought the scene was so real that much of my fear was groundless. I trod firmly beside the sergeant, who was still real enough for anybody. We came to a crossroads in the passage where the light was brighter. A cleaner, brighter passage with shiny steel walls ran away to each side, disappearing from view only where the distance brought its walls, floor, and roof to the one gloomy point. I thought I could hear a sound like hissing steam, and another noise like great cogwheels grinding one way, stopping and grinding back again. The sergeant paused to take a reading from the clock on the wall, then turned sharply to the left and called for me to follow. I shall not recount the passages we walked, or talk of the one with the round doors like portholes, or the other place where the sergeant got a box of matches for himself by putting his hand somewhere in the wall. It is enough to say that we arrived, after walking at least a mile of plate, into a well-lit, airy hall which was completely circular and filled with indescribable articles very much like machinery, but not quite as intricate as the more difficult machines. Large, expensive-looking cabinets of these articles were placed tastefully about the floor, while the circular wall was one mass of these inventions with little dials and meters placed plentifully here and there. Hundreds of miles of coarse wires were visible, running everywhere except about the floor, and there were thousands of doors like the strong hinged doors of ovens and arrangements of knobs and keys that reminded of American cash registers. The sergeant was reading out figures from one of the many clocks and turning a small wheel with great care. Suddenly the silence was split by the sound of a loud, frenzied hammering from far into the hall where the apparatus seemed thickest and most complex. The blood ran away at once on my startled face. I looked at the sergeant, but he still attended patiently to his clock and wheel, reciting numbers under his breath and making no noise. The hammering stopped. I sat down to think and gather my scattered wits on a smooth article like an iron bar. It was pleasantly warm and comforting. Before any thought had time to come to me, there was another burst of hammering. Chin silence, then a low but violent noise like passionately murmured oaths, then silence again, and finally the sound of heavy footsteps approaching from behind the tall cabinets of machinery. Feeling weakness in my spine, I went over quickly and stood beside the sergeant. He had taken a long white instrument like a large thermometer or band conductor's baton out of a hole in the wall, and was examining the calculations on it with a frown of preoccupation. He paid no attention to me or the hidden presence that was approaching invisibly. When I heard the clanging steps surrounding the last cabinet, I, against my will, looked up wildly. It was Policeman McCruskey. He was riding heavily and hearing another large baton or thermometer, which was orange colored. He made straight for the sergeant and showed him an instrument, putting a red finger on a marking that was on it. They stood there silently examining each other's instruments. The sergeant looked somewhere relieved, I thought, when he had the matter thought out and marched away to the hidden place the McCruskins had just come from. Soon we heard the sound of hammering, this time gentle and rhythmic. McCruskey put his baton away into the wall in the hole where the sergeant had been, and turned to me, giving me generously the wrinkled cigarette which I had come to regard as a herald of unthinkable conversation. "Do you like it?" he inquired. "It is neat. You would not believe the convenience of it," he remarked cryptically. The sergeant came back to us, drying his red hands in a towel, looking very satisfied with himself. I looked at the two of them sharply. They received my glance and exchanged them privately between them before discarding it. Is this eternity? I asked. Why do you call it eternity? Feel my chin, Mercutian said, smiling enigmatically. We'll call it that, the sergeant explained, because you don't grow old here. When you leave here, you'll be the same age as you were coming in and the same stature and age. There's an 8-day clock for the patent balance needed to action before it never goes. How can you be sure you don't grow old here? Feel my chin, Mercutian said again. It is simple. Your beard does not grow, and if you're fed, you do not get hungry, and if you're hungry, you do not get hungrier. People will smoke all day and will still be full. Whiskey will still be there no matter how much of it you drink, and it does not matter in any case because it will not make you drunker than your own sobriety. Indeed, I muttered. I've been here for a long time this today morning, Ruskin said, and my jaw is still as smooth as a woman's back, and the convenience of it takes my breath away. It's a great thing to now face the old razor. How big is all this place? It has no size at all, the sergeant explained. There's no difference anywhere in it, and we have no conception of the existence of its unchanging co-equality. McCruskeen lit a match for his cigarettes and then threw it carefully on the plate floor where it lay looking very much important and alone. Did you not bring your bicycle and ride through all of it and see it all and draw a chart? I asked. Sergeant smiled at me as if I were a baby. The bicycle's easy, he said. My astonishment, he went to over one of the bigger ovens and manipulated some knobs, pulled open a massive metal door, and lifted out a brand new bicycle. It had a 3-speed gear and an oil bath, and I could see the Vaseline still glistening on the right parts. He put the front wheel down and spun the back wheel expertly in the air. The bicycle is an easy pancake, he said, but it's no use, it does not matter. Come and I'll demonstrate the res ipsa. Leaving the bicycle, he led the way through the intricate cabinets and round behind the other cabinets and in through a doorway. And what I saw, my brain shrink painfully in my head and pour a paralyzing chill across my heart. It was not so much that the other hall was in every respect an exact replica of the one we had just left. It was more that my burdened eyes saw that one of the cabinet doors on the wall was standing open, and a brand new bicycle was leaning against the wall, identically like the other one, and leaning even at the same angle. If you want to take another walk ahead to reach the same place here without coming back, you can walk on till you reach the next doorway and you are welcome. But it will do you no good, and even if you stay here behind you, it is probable you'll find us there to meet you. Here I gave a cry as my eye caught a spent match lying clearly on the floor. What do you think of the no shaving? McCruskey asked boastfully. Surely that is an uninterruptible experiment. It is inescapable and highly intractable, the sergeant said. Muskegon was examining some knobs in the central cabinet. He turned his head and called to me. Come over, he called, till I show you something to tell your friends about. Afterward, I saw that this was one of his rare jokes, because what he showed me was something I could tell nobody about. There are no suitable words in the world to tell my meaning. His cabinet had an opening resembling a chute, and another large opening resembling a black hole about a yard below the chute. He pressed two red articles like typewriter keys and turned a large knob away from them. And at once there was a rumbling noise as if thousands of full biscuit boxes were falling downstairs. I felt that these falling things would come out of the chute at any moment. And so they did, appearing a few seconds in die air and then disappearing down the black hole below. Well, what can I say about them? In color, they were not white or black, or certainly bore no intermediate color. They were far from dark and anything but bright. But strange to say, it was not their unprecedented hue that took most of my attention. It had another quality that made me watch them wild-eyed, dry-throated, and with no breathing. I can make no attempt to describe this quality. It took me hours of thought long afterwards to realize why these articles were astonishing. They lacked an essential property of all known objects. I cannot call it shape or configuration, since shapelessness is not what I refer to it at all. You can only say that these objects, not one of which resembled the other, which were of no known dimensions, were not square or rectangular or circular, or simply irregular shaped, nor could it be said that their endless variety was due to dimensional dissimilarities. Simply, the rich people are just buying all their shit at the fucking mall. Well, you know. Anyway, they were not square or rectangular or circular or simply irregular shaped, nor could it be said that their endless variety was due to dimensional dissimilarities. Simply their appearance, even if the word was not inadmissible, was not understood by the eye and was in any event indescribable. That is enough to say. When Recruiting had unpressed the buttons, the sergeant asked me politely what else I would like to see. What else is there? Anything. Anything I mention will be shown to me. Of course. The ease with which the sergeant had reduced a bicycle that would cost at least £8 ten to buy had set in motion in my head certain trains of thought. My nervousness had been largely reduced to absurdity and nothingness by what I had seen, and now found myself taking an interest in the commercial possibilities of eternity. What I would like, I said slowly, is to see you open a door and lift out a solid block of gold weighing half a ton. The sergeant smiled and shrugged his shoulders. But that is impossible. It is a very unreasonable requisition, he said. It's vexatious and unconscionable, he added legally. My heart sank down at this, but she said, anything. I know, man, but there's a limit and a boundary to everything within the scope of reason's garden. That is disappointing, I muttered. Rikushkin stirred definitively. Of course, he said, if there were no objection to me assisting the sergeant in lifting out the block. What? Is that a difficulty? I'm not a cart horse, the sergeant said with simple dignity. Yet, anyhow, he added, reminding all of us of his great-grandfather, then we'll all lift it out, I cried. And so we did. The knobs were manipulated, the door opened, and a block of gold, which was encased in a well-made timber box, was lifted down with all its strength and placed on the floor. Gold is a common article, and there's not much to see when you look at it, the sergeant observed, asking for something confidential and superior to ordinary preeminence. Now a magnifying glass is a better thing because you can look at it, and what you see when you look is a third thing altogether. Another door was opened by McCruskeen, and I was handed a magnifying glass. A very ordinary looking instrument with a bone handle. I looked at my hand through it and saw nothing that was recognizable. Then I looked at several other things, but saw nothing I could clearly see. McCruskeen took it back with a smile at my puzzled eye. It magnifies to invisibility, he explained. Makes everything so big that there is room in the glass for only the smallest particle of it, not enough to make it different from any other thing that is dissimilar. My eye moved from his explaining face to the block of gold, which my attention never really left. What I'd like to see now, I said carefully, is 50 cubes of solid gold, each weighing 1 pound. Krusky went away obliviously like a train waiter and got these articles out of the wall without a word, arranging them in a neat structure on the floor. The sergeant had strolled away idly to examine some clocks and take readings. In the meantime, my brain was working coldly and quickly. I ordered a bottle of whiskey, precious stones to the value of $200,000, some bananas, a fountain pen, and writing materials, and finally a serge of suit blue with silk lining. All these things were on the floor. I remembered other things I had overlooked and ordered underwear, shoes and banknotes, and a box of matches. McCruskeen, sweating from his labor with the heavy doors, was complaining of the heat and paused to drink some amber ale. The sergeant was quietly clicking a little wheel with a tiny ratchet. I think that is all, I said at last. The sergeant came forward and gazed at the pile of merchandise. Lord save us, he said. I'm going to take these things with me, I announced. Sergeant and McCruskeen exchanged their private glances. Then they smiled. In that case, you'll need a big, strong bag, the sergeant said. He went to another door and got me a hogskin bag worth at least 50 guineas in the open market. I carefully packed away my belongings. I saw McCruskeen crushing out a cigarette on the wall and noticed that it was still the same length as it had been when it lit half an hour ago. My own was burning quietly also, but was completely unconsumed. I crushed it out also and put it in my pocket. When I was about to close the bag, I had a thought. I then stooped and turned to the policeman. I require just one more thing. I want a small weapon suitable for the pocket which will exterminate any man or any million men who try at any time to take my life. Without a word, the sergeant brought me a small black article like a torch. There is influence in that, he said, that will change any man or men into gray powder at once if you point it and press the knob, and if you don't like gray powder, you can have purple powder or yellow powder or any other shade of powder. If you tell me now, I can provide your favorite color. Would a velvet colored color please you? Gray will do, I said briefly. I put this murderous weapon into the bag, closed it, and stood up again. I think we might go home now, I said the words casually, and took care not to look at the faces of the policemen. To my surprise, they agreed readily, and we started off without resounding steps till we found ourselves again in the endless corridors, I carrying the heavy bag and the policeman conversing quietly about the reading scene. I felt happy and satisfied with my day. I felt changed and regenerated and full of courage. How does this thing work? I inquired pleasantly, seeking to make friendly conversation. The sergeant looked at me. "It has helical gears," he said informatively. "Did you not see the wires?" McCruskey asked, turning to me in some surprise. "You would be astonished at the importance of the caracal," the sergeant said. "The great thing is to keep the beam reading down as low as possible, and you're doing very well if the pilot marks steady. But if you let the beam rise, where are you with your lever? If you neglect the charcoal feeding, she'll send the beam rocketing up, and there's bound to be a serious explosion. Low pilot, small fall," McCruskey said. He spoke neatly and wisely, as if his remark were a proverb. "But the secret of it all in all," continued the sergeant, "is the daily readings. 10 your daily readings, and your conscience will be as clear as a clean shirt on Sunday morning. I'm a great believer in the daily readings." Did I see everything of importance? At this, the policemen looked at each other in amazement and laughed outright. The raucous roars careered away from us up and down the corridor and came back in pale echoes from the distance. "I suppose you think a smell is a simple thing," the sergeant said, smiling. "A smell? Smell is the most complicated phenomenon in the world, and it cannot be unraveled by the human snout or understood properly, although dogs have better way with smells than we have." "But dogs are very poor riders on bicycles," McCruskey said, presenting the other side of the comparison. "We have a machine down there," the sergeant continued, "that splits up any smell into sub and inner smells the way you can split up a beam of light with a glass instrument. It's very interesting and edifying. You would not believe the dirty smells that are inside the perfume of the lovely lily of the mountain. And there's a machine for taste," McCruskey put in. "The taste of fried chop. You might think it not 40% the taste of the." He grimaced and spat, looking delicately reticent. "It feels," the sergeant said. "Now there's nothing so smooth as a woman's back, or so you might imagine. But if that feels broken up for you, you would not be pleased with women's backs. I'll promise you that on my solemn oath and parsley. Half the inside of the smoothest is as rough as a bullock's hips. Next time you come here," McCruskey promised, "you'll see surprising things." This in itself, I thought, was a surprising thing for anyone to say, after what I had just seen, and after what I was carrying in the bag. He groped in his pocket, found his cigarette, relit it, and proffered me the match. Hampered with the heavy bag, I was some minutes finding mine, but the match still burned evenly and brightly at its end. We smoked in silence and went on through the dim passage until we reached the lift again. There were clock faces or dials beside the open lift, which I had not seen before, and another pair of doors beside it. I was very tired with my bag of gold and clothes and whiskey, and made for the lift to stand on it and put the bag down at last. When nearly on the threshold, I was arrested in my step by a call from a sergeant, which rose near the pitch of a woman's scream. "Don't go in there!" The color fled from my face at the urgency of his tone. I turned my head round and stood rooted there with one foot before the other, like a man photographed unknowingly in the middle of a walk. "Why?" "Because the floor will collapse underneath the bottom of your feet and send you down where no one went before you." "And why?" "The bag, man." "The simple thing is," McCruskey said calmly, "that you cannot enter the lift unless you weigh the same weight as you weighed when you weighed into it. If you do," said the sergeant, "it will extirpate you unconditionally and kill the life out of you." I put the bag, clinking with its bottle and gold cubes, rather roughly on the floor. It was worth several million pounds. Standing there on the plate floor, I leaned on the plate wall and searched my wits for some reason and understanding and consolation in adversity. I understood little except that my plans were vanquished and my visit to eternity unavailing and calamitous. I wiped a hand on my damp brow and stared blankly at the two policemen, who were now smiling and looking knowledgeable and complacent. A large emotion came swelling against my throat and filling my mind with great sorrow and sadness more remote and desolate than a great strand of evening with the sea far away, at its distant turn. Looking down with a bent head at my broken shoes, I saw them swim and dissolve in big tears that came bursting on my eyes. I turned to the wall and gave loud choking sobs and broke down completely and cried loudly like a baby. I know how long I was crying. I think I heard the two policemen discussing me in sympathetic undertones as if they were trained doctors in a hospital. Without lifting my head, I looked across the floor and saw McCruskey's leg walking away with my bag. Then I heard another one's door being opened and the bag fired roughly in. Here I cried loudly again, turning the wall of the lift and giving complete rein to my great misery. At last I was taken gently by the shoulders, weighed and guided into the lift. Then I felt the two large policemen crowding in beside me and got the heavy smell of blue official broadcloth impregnating through and through their humanity. As the floor of the lift began to resist my feet, I felt a piece of crisp paper rustling against my averted face. Looking out in the poor light, I saw that McCruskey was stretching his hand in my direction, dumbly and meekly, across the chest of the sergeant, He was standing tall and still beside me. In the hand was a small white paper bag. I glanced into it and saw round colored things the size of floor rings. Creams, McCruskey said kindly. He shook the bag encouragingly and started to chew and suck loudly, as if there were almost supernatural pleasure to be had from these sweetmeats. Beginning for some reason to sob again, I put my hand in the bag, but when I took a sweet, 3 or 4 others had emerged with it in the heat of the policeman's pocket came out with it in one sticky mass of plaster. Awkwardly and foolishly, I tried to disentangle them, but failed completely, and then ran the jar in my mouth. I stood there sobbing and sucking and snuffling. I heard the sergeant sighing heavily and could feel his broad flank receding as he sighed. Lord, I love sweets. Have one, McCruskey smiled, rattling his bag. What are you saying, man? The sergeant cried, turning to view McCruskey's face. Are you out of your mind, man alive? If I took one of these, not one, but half a corner of the quarter of one of them, I declare to the hokey that my stomach would blow up like a live landmine, and I'd be galvanized in my bed for a full fortnight, roaring out profanity from terrible students of indigestion and heart scalds. Do you want to kill me, man? Sugar barley is a very smooth sweet, McCruskey said, speaking awkwardly with his bulging mouth. They give it to babies, and it's a winter for the bowels. If I ate sweets at all, I would live on the carnival assorted. Now there's a sweet for you. There is a great sucking in them. The flavor is very spiritual, and one of them is good for half an hour. You ever try licorice pennies? Asked McCruskey. Not them, but the 4-penny coffee cream mixture. Have a great charm. Or the Dolly mixture? No. They say, McCruskey said, that the Dolly mixture is the best that was ever made and that it will never be surpassed, and indeed I could eat them and keep eating until I got sick. That may be, the sergeant said, but if I had my health, I'd give you a good run for it with the carnival mixture. As they wrangled on about sweets and passed the chocolate bars and sticks of rock, the floor was passing strongly from underneath. There was a change in the pressing, 2 clicks were heard, and the sergeant started to undo the doors, explaining to McCruskey his outlook on jujubes and jelly sweets and Turkish delights. With sloped shoulders and a face that was stiff from my dried tears, I stepped wearily out of the lift into the little stone room and waited until they had checked the clocks. Then I followed them into the thick bushes and kept behind them as I met the attacks of branches and fought back. I did not care much. It was not until we emerged, breathless and with bleeding hands, on the green margin of the main road that I realized a strange thing had happened. It was 2 or 3 hours since the sergeant and I had started our journey, yet the country and the trees and all the voices of everything around were still wore an air of early morning. There was an incommutable earliness in everything, a sense of waking and beginning. Nothing had yet grown and matured, and nothing begun had yet finished. Bird singing had not yet turned finally the last twist of tunefulness. A rabbit emerging still had a hidden tail. The sergeant stood monumentally in the middle of the hard gray road and picked some small green things delicately from his person. McCruskey stood stooped in knee-high grass, looking over his person and shaking himself sharply like a hen. I stood myself, looking warily in the bright sky and wondering over the wonders of the high morning. When the sergeant was ready, he made a polite sign with his thumb, and the 2 of us set off together in the direction of the barrack. McCruskey was behind, but he soon appeared silently in front of us, sitting without a move on the top of his bicycle. He said nothing as he passed us and stirred no breath or limb, and he rolled away from us down the giant hill till a bend received him silently. As I walked with the sergeant, I did not notice where we were or what we passed by on the road, men, beasts, or houses. My brain was like an ivy near where the swallows fly. Thoughts were darting around me like a sky that was loud and dark with birds, but none came into me or near enough. Forever in my ear was the click of heavy shutting doors, the whine of boughs trailing their loose leaves in a swift springing, and the clang of hobnails and metal plates. When I reached the barrack, I paid no attention to anything or anybody, but went straight to bed and lay on it and fell into a full, simple sleep. Compared with this sleep, death is a rested thing, peace is a clamor, and darkness a burst of light. 9. Yeah. I was awakened the following morning by sounds of loud hammering outside the window, and I found myself immediately recalling the recollection was this absurd paradox. That I had been in the next world yesterday, lying there half awake, it is unnatural my thought should turn to De Selby. Like all the great thinkers, he had been looked to for guidance on many of the major perplexities of existence. The commentators, it is to be feared, have not succeeded in extracting from the vast storehouse of his writings any consistent, cohesive, or comprehensive corpus of spiritual belief and praxis. Nevertheless, his ideas of paradise are not without interest. Apart from the contents of the famous De Selby Codex, the main references are to be found in the Rural Atlas and the so-called substantive appendices to the country album. Briefly, he indicates that the happy state is not unassociated with water, and that water is rarely absent from any wholly satisfactory situation. He does not give any closer definition of this hydraulic Elysium, but mentions that he has written more fully on the subject elsewhere. It is not clear, unfortunately, whether the reader is expected to infer that a wet day is more enjoyable than a dry one, or that a lengthy course of baths is a reliable method of achieving peace of mind. He praises for the equilibrium of water, its circumbency, equiponderance, and equitableness, and declares that water, if not abused, can achieve absolute superiority. For the rest, little remains save the record of his obscure and unwitnessed experiments. The story is one of long succession of prosecutions for water wastage at the suit of the local authority. At one hearing, it was shown that he had used 9,000 gallons in one day, and on another occasion, almost 80,000 gallons in the course of a week. The word used in this context is the important one. Local officials had checked the volume of water entering the house daily from a street connection, had sufficient curiosity to watch the outlet sewer, and made the astonishing discovery that none of the vast quantity of water drawn in ever left the house. Commentators have seized avidly on this statistic, but are, as usual, divided in their interpretations. In Bassett's view, the water was treated in the patent water box and diluted to a degree that made it invisible, in the guise of water, at all events, to the untutored watchers at the sewer. Hawkshaw's theory in this regard is more acceptable. He tends to the view that the water was boiled and converted, probably through the water box, into tiny jets of steam, which were projected through an upper window into the night in an endeavor to wash the black volcanic stains from the skins or air bladders of the atmosphere, and thus dissipate the hated and insanitary night. However far-fetched this theory may appear, unexpected color is lent to it by a previous court case when the physicist was fined 40 shillings. On this occasion, some 2 years before the construction of the water box, the Selby was charged with playing a fire hose out of one of the upper windows of his house at night, an operation which resulted in several passersby being drenched to the skin. On another occasion, he had to face the curious charge of hoarding water, the police testifying that every vessel in his house, from the bath down to the set of 3 ornamental egg cups, was brimming with the liquid. Again, a trumped-up charge of attempting suicide was preferred merely because the savant had accidentally half drowned himself in a quest for some vital statistic of celestial aquatics. It is clear from contemporary newspapers that his inquiries into water were accompanied by the persecutions and illegal pin-pricking unparalleled since the days of Galileo. It may be some consolation to the minions responsible to know that their brutish and barbaric machinations succeeded in denying posterity a clear record of the import of these experiments, and perhaps a primer of hysteric water science that would banish much of our worldly pain and unhappiness. Virtually all that remains of De Selby's work in this regard is his house, where his countless tops are still left them, though a newer generation of more delicate mind has had the water turned off at the main. Water? The word was in my ear as well as in my brain. Rain was beginning to beat on the windows, not a soft or friendly rain, but large angry drops which came sputtering with great force upon the glass. The sky was gray and stormy, and out of it I heard the harsh sounds of wild geese and ducks laboring across the wind on their coarse pinions. Black quails called sharply from their hidings, and swollen streams babbled dimensionally. The trees, I knew, would be angular and ill-tempered in the rain, and boulders would gleam coldly at the eye. Would have sought sleep again without delay were it not for the loud hammering outside. I arose and went out on the cold floor to the window. Outside there was a man with sacks on his shoulders, hammering at a wooden framework he was erecting in the barrack yard. His red face and strong arm limped around his work with enormous stiff strides. His mouth was full of nails which bristled like steel fangs in the shadow of his mustache. He extracted them one by one as I watched, and hammered them perfectly into the wet wood. He paused to test the beam with his great strength and accidentally let the hammer fall. He stooped awkwardly and picked it up. "Did you notice anything?" "No." "The hammer, man. Looks like an ordinary hammer. What about it?" "Must be blind. It fell on his foot." "Yes? Then he didn't bat an eyelid. It might have been a feather for all the sign he gave." Here I gave a sharp cry of perception, and immediately threw up the sash to the window and leaned out into the unhospitable day, hailing the workman excitedly. He looked at me curiously and came over with a friendly frown of interrogation on his face. "What's your name?" I asked him. Oh, Fiersa, the middle brother, he answered. Will you come out here, he continued, and give me a hand with wet carpentry? Have you a wooden leg? For answer he dealt his left thigh a mighty blow with the hammer. It echoed hollowly in the rain. He kept his hand clownishly at his ear, as if listening intently to the noise he had made. Then he smiled. I'm building a high scaffold here, he said, and it is lame work where the ground is bumpy. I can find use for the assistance of competent assistants. Do you know Martin Finnecane? He raised his hand in a military salute and nodded. He's almost a relation, he said, but not completely. He's closely related to my cousin, but they were never married, never had the time. Here I knocked my own leg sharply on the wall. Hear that? I asked him. He gave a start, then shook my hand and looked brotherly and low, and asked me if it was the left or the right. Scribble a note, send in for assistance. There's no time to lose. I did so at once, asking Martin Finnecane to come and save me in the nick of time from being strangled to death on the scaffold and telling him he would have to hurry. I did not know whether he could come as he had promised he would, but in any present danger, anything was worth trying. I saw Mr. O'Pherson going quickly away through the mist and threading his path carefully through the sharp winds that were racing through the fields, his head down, sacks on his shoulders, and resolution in his heart. Then I went back to bed to try to forget my anxiety. I said a prayer that neither of the other brothers was out on the family bicycle, because it would be wanted to bring my message quickly to the captain and the one-legged man. Then I felt a hope kindling fitly within me, and I fell asleep again. And so the bicycles reveal their secrets. The atoms swap and souls cycle forever. Brian's wit rides the line between laugh and scream. What final revelations await in the final chapters? Stay tuned for the finale, if your reality can take the spin.